Got a very special guest here, Vince Kramer, a commercial airline pilot and military veteran with over 20,000 flying hours. He's flown for United Airlines and American Airlines and type-rated in the Airbus A319 and A320 aircraft and the Boeing 737. And he currently flies the Airbus A320 for United Airlines. Good afternoon, Captain.
Well, good afternoon, Toby. Actually, I just retired, so I'm a retired airline pilot now.
What made you want to retire?
Well, a couple things. One, I've got two loves, two passions in my life. One, flying for sure,
Yeah.
and two, to help people find themselves and live the life that they're meant to live. And with the opportunities that came up because of COVID and the airlines cutting back on pilots initially, I thought it was a good opportunity for me to start following my second passion.
Absolutely. A lot of people have sort of found a new life over the last couple of years, haven't they?
They certainly have.
Yeah. So when you were a pilot, what was a typical day like? Was there a typical day?
Well, in a lot of ways, there's a typical days, and a lot of ways, there's not typical days when it comes to flying airplanes. I'll tell you that as a commercial airline pilot, especially for a major airline, in many ways, you're almost an independent contractor. You never really see your bosses. You show up for work, you do your flight planning, you meet your crew. Each flight, because of the way United does business, the pilots are the same for a given trip. Say we're on a 3-day trip, the pilots are the same. I fly with the same lady, the same guy during that trip. But at the back of the airplane, just about every flight, we have a new crew. So it's like forming a new team every single time that you go out for a flight. So it's because of the standardization that's at the airlines for safety, for the ability to shift from working with somebody new each and every flight. It's all the same. But then because there's different faces, different personalities, it's different.
Why is it they changed the crew like that?
Well, I think mostly because of being able to manage an airline that's got, 3,000 flights a day and making sure that everybody gets the rest time that they need. And different bases have different launch times. So there's just so many moving parts that I think it's just easier to schedule the crews in a way that benefits the crew members, but also benefits the schedule.
Yeah. And when you were flying, were you sort of stationed at a particular airport, or could you sort of be anywhere at any time?
Well, it's interesting. It's all seniority based. So you bid on the bases that you'd be flying out of. So the majority of my career I spent at the training center in Denver, Colorado. I trained people for several years. Then I evaluated in the simulators for several years. And then I held some management positions where I was in charge of the training and building the training programs. When I was out flying the line, I had several bases while I was at United. I flew out of Houston. I flew out of Denver. I flew out of Chicago. I flew out of Los Angeles. So a little bit of everywhere.
And of course, we sort of all know about this pilot bag thing. What kind of things did you bring with you?
Well, for me, because I had that second passion, of course, you've got your change of clothes, and for those people who are on reserve, you might be out on the road for 6 or 7 days and not make it home, so you're not sure that's going to happen. So, of course, you've got 6 or 7 days of clothes available to you. But for me, because of this second passion, I carried my computer, I carried an iPad, everything I could do to help develop my programs that we provide through our company called Imagine Miracles. And then I did podcast on the road. I have my own podcast show.
Wow.
And I carried a microphone and I carried a headset so I could do podcasts while I was out on the road.
Yeah. So being a podcaster, did that help with the announcements you had to make on the plane?
I guess it did. I never even thought about it that way. But, initially when you become an airline pilot, there's standard announcements that they give you to just help you on that journey. And then after a while, you get to learn what people like, what they want to hear, what makes them feel most comfortable. I was really big in customer engagement. I think a pilot engaging with the customers is extremely important. So I spent a lot of time in first class with the first class passengers, but learning how to share what they want to know in a way that they know that I've got everything under control, especially when the weather's bad or we're running late, or even sometimes in the air, something happens to the airplane. They want to be comfortable and calm, but they want to know also. So sometimes I guess because I learned to ask the right questions and I learned to listen for what people wanted to hear. So I guess podcasts did help me.
Yeah. And I like those announcements at the start where they sort of give you the flight plan. They'll be like, we'll be flying out over the Severn Estuary, cruising at an altitude of whatever feet. Do you think it's quite important to give detailed things like that?
For some people it is. There's a lot of people that are in the back of the airplane that are quite afraid to fly. More than you would actually believe. When I was working at the training center, I had an opportunity from time to time to bring people in who had a fear of flying and give them an opportunity to see what it was like in the airplane. But sometimes people like to know that there might be some turbulence along the way, or we're going to be circumventing some thunderstorms, but we're going to stay far enough away you're safe. Because you look out the window, especially you're flying at night and you see this lightning in these clouds and everybody thinks you're so much closer. So every little bit of information that you can give those people that are scared and really putting their lives in your hands, especially in their minds, they're really putting their lives in your hands. It helps them feel more comfortable.
And when we're experiencing turbulence, what actually is that?
It's a change of wind direction or change of wind speed. That's pretty much what it is. And the more severe the turbulence, it's the sharper change in direction or a sharper change in wind speed. So yes, turbulence can be extremely dangerous, but also it's no more than that change of wind.
And I guess most of the time when you're experiencing it, it's nowhere near dangerous, right? It's just a little shake.
Right, yes. But, the airplane can drop a foot and you feel like it's dropped a couple 100 feet. I mean, it just that little bit, because our bodies experience it in a way that we're not used to experiencing, because we don't have the visual cues or we don't have the audio cues of what's happening. So now our brain takes that jolt feeling and thinks, whoa, that was a big change in altitude, where actually it's not that big a deal.
And I suppose when people are already scared of flying, when nothing's happened yet, the slightest thing is going to set off their anxiety, right?
For sure. And I'll share with you, Toby, that most of the fear comes from not being in control, not necessarily what's happening, but not having any control over, not being able to change their situation themselves.
And as well, sometimes once you've just taken off, the engines wind back a bit. And that's to do with the fact that you're going more straight, so you don't need as much power, right?
Well, yes, a couple things. One, the most power you need in any flight is takeoff, for sure. Because that's when the airplane's the heaviest. That's when you're trying to get up away from the ground. There might be some obstacles that you want to make sure that you're climbing over. But then also the engines are rated to keep their life expectancy longer. They're rated for different power settings at different times in the flight. So once you're up away from the ground, you go into what's called a climb thrust. And that's just the thrust that, one, doesn't put nearly the tension on the engines that a takeoff thrust would put on it, but then also give you the ability to climb out at a given rate.
So what made you want to actually be a pilot originally?
Oh, that's such a great story. Let me tell you, when I knew I wanted to be a pilot, why I didn't want to be a
Yeah.
pilot, and then how I found my way back, because I think we're always being pulled towards our passions.
Yeah.
We're always being pulled for those things that we're meant to do in life. So when I was 5, 6 years old, I used to lie on the grass and watch airplanes fly over and watch those contrails. And I just knew I wanted to be a pilot. That's all I could think of, is being a pilot.
Yeah.
And then about 7 years old, 8 years old, I was a Cub Scout. And one of our den mothers took us out to the airport, and we got this opportunity, to four of us in each little airplane, to climb in this airplane and go fly
Wow.
with a local pilot. And I can't remember for sure, it's been a long time ago, but I think the guy that was flying the airplane that I was in was probably in his late 20s, maybe mid 20s. So he was out giving airplane rides to build his time. And so we took off, we went up flying, and I just loved it. It was great. I like seeing the houses get smaller. I like seeing the river snake down below. And then this guy did something that, in my opinion, probably wasn't the smartest thing to do with 7 and 8-year-olds, but he pulled the nose of the airplane up and let the airspeed get slower. Well, as an adult now and as a pilot, I know all he was doing was letting the airplane run out of airspeed, which is called a stall. And then once the airplane stalled, it automatically tries to get the airspeed back so it can fly again. But here the nose is pointed up and it's getting quieter and quieter and quieter. And I was getting more scared, more scared, more scared. And it got so quiet that I thought, oh, we don't have an engine anymore. And then the nose fell over because the airplane wanted to pick up airspeed. And now the nose is pointed towards the ground, and it's starting to get louder and louder and louder again. And I thought for sure I was going to die. And it was probably 7. I no longer wanted to be a pilot. That's it. I'm afraid of being up in the air. I'm afraid of heights. I'm afraid of dying. And I let my dream go. And then fast forward about 17 years, I joined the military to finish my education because my parents didn't have the money to help me go to college. I had a couple injuries, so I couldn't play sports in college. So I joined the military to finish my education. And I took the Air Force officer qualifying test. When I took the test, my pilot scores and navigator scores were off the charts.
Wow.
And it's like, everybody, if you're going to be an Air Force officer, if you want to finish your degree, then you want to fly airplanes, because that's what it's all about in the Air Force. And I decided to give it a try. And the first 5 or 6 flights were okay. I was what they call inactively sick. I felt like I was going to lose my lunch. But after about 5 flights, I started to feel comfortable. And by the time I was halfway through the first section of Air Force pilot training, I was in love. And now I remembered what that little boy who laid on the grass watching the airplanes fly over wanted to do.
Yeah. When was the first time you sort of went from flying in the military to doing it for an airline? I guess is there a whole other training process for that?
No, every airplane you fly is a new training process. And then, of course, even just moving from company to company in the major airlines, everybody's got their way of doing business. And it's important for every pilot to learn that way of business, because you climb in a seat with a guy you've never met before and go fly a 3-day trip. You need to know that you're on the same page. For me, I love the military. I love the camaraderie. I love the flying. I loved what you could do with airplanes. But I got to a point in my career where there was some things I didn't agree with the politics of the military world.
Mm.
But then I also knew that I was getting to the point in my military career that I wasn't going to be flying much.
Yeah.
And I had to make a decision. How important is flying airplanes to me? How important is it to close that door and be in what I call my meditative world?
Mhm.
Because it's just a whole nother world in the cockpit for me. I have that much passion for flying. So I talked to my wife at the time and said, look, I love the military. We're doing really well here. There's lots of opportunities, but I don't want to give up the cockpit.
Mm.
So we made the decision to get out of the airline or out of the military at that time. There was some options available to me, and started looking for a career in the commercial world.
Yeah. And how different is flying a commercial plane to the military in terms of the atmosphere of it?
I think the biggest part of it is, when you're flying a military jet, especially if you're flying a crew jet, everybody knows that, you're there flying airplanes, you got a mission to do. The
Mm.
mission is number one. If it gets a little rough, it gets a little rough. It is what it is. You
Yeah.
get the mission done because that's the most important thing. And safety is very important in the military also, don't get me wrong.
Mm.
But when you move to the commercial world, especially when you're flying, 150, 300, 350 people, one, their safety is always number one, and the safety of the airplane, the safety of the crew, the safety of the passengers, but also comfort.
Mm.
And in the military, yeah, it was nice to be comfortable flying, but it didn't matter.
Yeah.
But, make sure that you stay away from turbulence if you can with the commercial world. Make sure everybody feels comfortable and confident in you in the back of the airplane. So it's a big switch.
Yeah.
And then also, then you throw into, okay, it's a business.
Yeah.
And, especially as you move to the left seat, you move into the captain world, you're looking at, can I save money? Can I save fuel? Can I take care of the passengers? Can I act and be with the passengers in a way that they're going to come back? Because that's the livelihood.
Yeah.
That's the mission, the passengers, where in the military, the mission was sometimes launching missiles from a airborne airplane. Other times it was communications. And that was the most important thing.
Yeah. And how do you actually move to the left seats? How do you become a captain?
There's many things involved with it. One, and everybody's different, and that's what I love about the airline world. First of all, you've got to have enough time in the airplane, and so you've got to have some right seat time. And right seat time is really important because you learn the way of the airline, you learn the way of working together as a crew. But then there also has to be seats available. So for some times, when I first got hired at American, they told us it was going to be 17 to 20 years before we would move from the right seat to the left seat, just because of attrition and how long it would take for those seats to come available. Other times right now, there's people moving from the right seat to the left seat in just a couple of years because there's a bit of a pilot shortage right now. But it's getting, by the time you get to a major airline, you are pretty well versed at being a pilot. You're pretty well versed at flying airplanes. Once again, as with the shortage, there's not as much experience coming in. But the biggest advantage and why I think it's important for people to get that right seat time is to learn all the other things. Because as an instructor, I'll tell you that our brain, when we're learning how to fly or we're learning a new airplane, our brain concentrates on that. And a lot of the necessity of the job kind of goes peripheral. So it's, your concentration is short-term memory and your long-term memory is kind of off in the distance. So if you can develop in the right seat the ability to know how to make decisions, who can help you make decisions, what's the best decisions to make in given situations, now you can feel comfortable in flying a new airplane or working with a new person from a place of you're solid in making all the other decisions that are required of an airline pilot.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, because you flew in the Airbus A320, I've got a particular question. Some people call this sound a dog bark. It sounds a bit like a saw as well, and you mainly hear it when you're perhaps at the gate or taxiing. So what is that in simple terms?
In simple terms, there's many of the parts of the airplane are run by hydraulic systems. So hydraulic pressure helps you put the flaps down. Hydraulic pressure helps you drop the gear. So there are hydraulic systems on the Airbus 320. There's 3 hydraulic systems. They call it green, yellow, and blue.
Yeah.
Those hydraulic systems run different things, but they're also, and we want this in our airplanes, they're redundant also. So the green system can help run yellow system parts. The flaps, the wings, the thing type of thing. So because we want redundancy, we want to make sure if we lose one system, another system can pick it up. Between the 2 major hydraulic systems is what they call a PTU. It's really kind of like a power takeoff that you would see on a tractor. So if, let's say, the pressure on one side goes low, that pump kicks in and the pressure from the other side helps run the equipment on the other side. So what you're hearing is when the airplane comes in, what did I say? The captain wants to save fuel, right?
Yeah.
So to save fuel, the captain shuts one of the engines down. And now he's taxiing in on one engine. You don't need 2 engines to taxi around the airport.
Yeah.
So he shuts one engine down. Now that hydraulic system that was run by the engine that you shut down is no longer producing all this pressure.
Yeah.
So this PTU, this power takeoff unit, picks up the power from the engine that's running, and you hear the woo, woo, woo. That's that pump putting pressure in the other side.
It's quite a good impression, actually. I guess you would have heard it a lot over your...
I've ridden in the back of a 320 a lot too. So, but that's all that's happening. That pump is trying to provide pressure to the other side.
Yeah. And then what's the reason for, sometimes it can speed up a bit and sometimes it lasts longer than other times, right?
Well, it depends on the demand on the system. So let's say you come to the gate, right?
Yeah.
And you hear the roo, 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 and then they start opening the cargo doors. Well, the cargo doors take hydraulic pressure.
Yeah.
So now there's a demand on the side, and now the pump runs faster.
Yeah.
So that's why it goes faster.
Aha, I see. Now, what would you say is the biggest misconception about being a pilot?
Well, it's not as glamorous as they show on TV for sure.
Yeah.
You're away from home. You're in a different bed 15, 16 nights a month. Yeah. You're on the road. What you don't see of an airline pilot is there's flight planning that happens before a flight. Yeah. There's debriefing that happens after a flight. You may sit, and we all experience this as a passenger. You might have to sit in the airport for 2 hours or 3 hours waiting for your next flight. Yeah. Same thing for pilots. Yeah. So, a pilot's day might be 12, 13 hours. And it's not that glamorous. Fly one flight, go to the bar, have all the people admire you because you're a pilot. Yeah. So there's definitely a misconception there. It's a hard job. Sometimes it can be a tedious job if you're flying for long flights and everything is going well. You're listening to the radio, so it can be a tedious job. And I'll be honest with you, Toby, for when I'm excited about flying airplanes, things are going wrong. because that means, I'm being a pilot. I'm using all my skills. I'm using all my training. So
Yeah.
if the weather's bad and there's snow blowing across the runway, that's exciting for me because I get to concentrate and I get to be a good pilot. So I think those are the big ones. It's not the glamour job that you think, and it's not necessarily. Sometimes it can be a boring job, and then the other side of it is it can be so exciting that your adrenaline is sky high.
Quite literally. And you have to sort of prepare for the worst, don't you? All bad things that could happen, you know exactly what you're going to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. For the majors in the U.S., I can't speak for the entire world, but the majors in the U.S., pilots go to a simulator every 9 months.
Yeah.
And they practice losing engines on takeoff. They practice bird strikes. They practice things happening in the back of the airplane. When I was training, and I would be one of those instructors that the crews would come back, they would get one takeoff with two engines.
Yeah.
And after they took off with two engines running, they probably only had one engine the whole 4 hours that they were in the sim after that.
Wow.
And they practiced losing engines on the engine failures on the runway. They practiced engine failures in the air. They practiced landing with one engine. They practiced putting fires out. They practiced all kinds of things. So
Wow.
you work and you study and you practice constantly to be ready for something that might happen, hoping that it never does.
Yeah. Is there some stuff, though, that you maybe can't practice?
Well, I'll be honest with you. The only things that you can't practice usually are the things that have never happened before. And then once they've happened, they find a way to program them into the simulators. So then you can practice them. That's the thing I love about aviation as a whole. You're constantly learning from what is happening.
Yeah.
So if somebody makes a mistake, an airplane breaks in a way that never would have been expected before, you learn about those, you talk about them. We call it hangar flying. You take this information that somebody else has experienced, and okay, how would I handle that situation? What would I have done different? What should I have done? And you just constantly learn and grow. So that's why it's such a very safety oriented occupation.
Yeah, that's the thing, I suppose. Every time an accident happens, rather ironically, it actually makes flying a lot safer.
Yes, for sure. And you can look at the safety record and see that. That would be like you ask a question of me and it didn't go so well.
Yeah.
You don't go sit down with a bunch of other podcasters and say, wow, how could I have asked that question better? Or what was a better way to take this guess? And sometimes, if you think about it, everything would be better as a whole if we did that.
Yeah, that's true. Now, is it too bad to not turn your phone off? Is there any scientific evidence behind it?
Well, there has been evidence of equipment being affected.
Yeah.
And it's really bad right now with the 5G world. The 5G world, it has actually created more problems. I know I've read a couple things. I still stay up on the commercial world. I've read a few things where pilots have had instruments show faulty information. We have it's called an altimeter, but it's an altimeter that tells you how high you are above the ground. And they've had some problems with that with 5G. So, that's part of it. And then if you think about it, our job is to keep you safe and to keep you safe in all ways. So one of the things about cell phones is, what if, and is it really important to have your phone on in that time frame when you're shooting a low visibility approach?
Yeah.
And if there is a blurb, here you are 100 feet above the ground and you lose the instruments that are helping you see the runway and helping you land, it's probably not a good thing.
Mm.
But then also on the other side of it, with an airplane, if you have a crash and there's a fire, that airplane can burn up in seconds.
Yeah.
It's not burning up over, okay, you're going to have a half hour to get out of the airplane. There's been accidents where airplanes burn up in a minute and a half.
Mm.
So do you want a whole bunch of people worrying about calling their loved ones or taking pictures when the name of the game is to get them out of that tube before it catches on fire?
Yeah.
So that's another reason why it's better to not have the cell phones out at a time when it's safe, because I don't want to scare anybody here. But if there ever was an accident, you don't have a whole lot of time to get out of that airplane.
Yeah.
And as the captain, I'm the last one out. So I want you out of the airplane fast.
Yeah. There's a lot of planes these days that have Wi-Fi on them, aren't there? How does that work? Because I'm assuming that doesn't interfere if they've allowed it.
No, it's the satellite world.
Yeah.
So it's going right to that piece of equipment. There's not phone waves going out, if you will, and phone waves coming in. So that effect, it goes right straight to the satellite antenna on top of the airplane, and then provides the Wi-Fi. But also, you have to put your computers away at 10,000 feet, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because that's the most dangerous part of the flight, up to 10,000 and below 10,000, because you're close to the ground and you may have to get out of the airplane in a hurry.
Yeah. And the windows have to be open and tray tables stowed away. I guess that's sort of for obvious reasons, right?
Yeah, it's all safety, right?
Yeah.
If the tables are down, somebody might get stuck in their row.
Yeah.
Why do you have to have the window shades open? So you can see and the crew can see, is there a fire outside your window if you have to get out of the airplane? Because if there's a fire out there, I don't want you to go out on the left wing if the left engine's on fire.
Yeah.
So it's all about being aware. It's all safety related, and not that we're worried about that engine being on fire, but if it is on fire, how can I take care of you? How can I make sure you're the safest I can keep?
Yes. Well as being a former pilot, you're also doing speaking and teaching and writing and things, aren't you? And of course, you've got the podcast. So tell us a little bit about that if you can.
Well, we've got a business called Imagine Miracles. And I shared with you earlier, Toby, that I had two passions.
Yeah.
And those two passions called to me to make the difference that I'm supposed to make in the world. And I believe each and every one of us are here to make a specific difference in the world. And what I realized was that through a lot of my life, I'm 63 years old now. I know I don't look it, but I am 63 right now. For the first 50 years of my life, I pretty much followed everybody else's rules and did what I was supposed to do to be a man and what looked successful and what was successful. And what I realized was that I had my own set of rules. And if I could follow my own set of rules and live the life that I was supposed to live, I would be much happier and I would be more helpful to people. So what I've done is I've taken that understanding and I want to help people find out who they are. I want to find out, why are you here? So you can find excitement and joy and satisfaction and fulfillment in whatever you do in your life, because you're making that difference that you're meant to make. So that's what Imagine Miracles is all about. We've got programs that we've built. We do Zoom training. We do online training. But I'm here to help people.
Yeah.
I'm here for you to see yourself. I'm here to keep you safe as you get to where you want to go. So I did that in an airplane, and now I'm doing it in my business. I want to keep you safe so you can find yourself and start living that life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where can we find all that and keep up to date with you everywhere?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll make it real easy for everyone. If you go to imaginemiracles.com/Toby. There'll be a page there for the first 10 people who are interested in just sitting down and chatting with me. I'll have a 20 to 30 minute chat with you for the first 10 people from your show. But there'll be some information on the book that we're publishing in June called Moments of Choice. and just opportunities to learn about some of our programs, some of the books I've written, and to really step into fully who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, many thanks for joining us here. It's been great talking to you today.
Thank you, Toby. I enjoyed being here, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to share something that I'm so passionate about.